Hi, I am Beth Ostrowski. I am with KCI Technologies in Nashville, Tennessee. And we are here today for the next hour to talk about setting promotion goals for young professionals as part of the Southern District ITE Mentorship series that is ongoing right now. I have with me three panelists that I will allow in a moment to introduce themselves after I take down this screen, but just wanted to kind of let y'all know what we're up to here today, and we're going to have a good conversation, share some personal experiences, and just what advice we can provide. This is definitely a soft subject, so you know, everyone will share their opinions and candidly, and then we'll look forward to y'all's questions at the end. Before I ask the panel to introduce themselves too, I just wanted to talk about kind of how I see the agenda going. So specifically this panel, we pulled together people that hopefully can speak to their personal experiences as young professionals and being promoted themselves. So we'll talk about that first. Then we'll spend a little bit of time talking about public sector versus private sector and some of the differences there. And then now, as people that are a little further along in our careers and might supervise individuals or mentor individuals, we'll talk about what we hear from others and what we share as advice to those that we work with today. After that, that'll probably take us 45 minutes or so, and then we'll open it up to questions at the end so that everybody can participate in that. I'm going to stop sharing the screen so everybody can see our faces, and let's start. Maybe we can just do alphabetical here with introduction. So Adrian, do you want to kick it off?
Sure. Can you hear me okay, Beth? Just making sure I don't have any
Yes.
audio issues.
Oh, well, I didn't say, Adrian, can you say too, talk about your first promotion?
Okay, so introduction and then first promotion. Got it. All right, well, good afternoon for those on the East Coast. I think some people are still good morning if you're Central Time. But anyways, my name is Adrian Emil. I graduated from Michigan State University in 2004. So I got about 17 years of experience in the engineering field. Currently working in the Washington, D.C. area. Throughout my career, I've worked for 2 private consulting firms. So I'll do my best to describe the private side. We have others that will obviously discuss more of the public promotion cycles, which obviously are different. I actually managed a large office for about 5 years and was responsible for providing promotion recommendations for staff to our regional team. And I also was president of the Women's Transportation Seminar, the DC chapter from 2018 to 2019, where we focus a lot on mentorship and helping women succeed in the field. And so I'm very passionate about this topic. My first promotion was when I was with Kimley Horn, and it was when I became an associate. I actually was not expecting it, which is something that I don't recommend. You should be expecting your promotions and being staying on top of it. But my first promotion is the president came in my office and I thought I was in trouble. I was like, oh no, what did I do? Like, I was first a little concerned, like, why does he need to talk to me? And I was promoted. I became an associate. And after that first promotion, it kind of set the tone where I needed to pay more attention and understand the promotion cycles. But for the first one, I was taken a little bit off guard, but I obviously was really excited. But it was something that I just wasn't expecting. So that's a little bit about me. I don't want to spend too much time. We'll talk more throughout this discussion. So I guess we can move on.
Adrian.
You're welcome.
Benjetta.
Hi, I'm Benjetta Johnson. I'm Traffic Services Director at NB5. I've been working in traffic engineering field for about 21 years now. And I would say about 2/3 of that time has been in the public sector. I worked for almost 14 years for NCDOT before moving to the private sector. And I guess as far as the first promotion that I got, that would have been going from what would have been classified as kind of an entry-level engineer level 1 with the State Department of Transportation to a level 2 engineer. So that process probably took me 24 to 30 months at the State Department. I had to apply for that promotion at the time, and that's typically, the way that you do it. If you're working for a public agency, there'd be a vacancy available. And so that's kind of the quick and dirty of that. On the private side, it's a little bit different. So Adrian's experience is kind of familiar to me as well.
Yeah, that's interesting dichotomy of Adrian being surprised and you having to actively pursue it.
Yeah.
Zane, how about you?
So good morning for those that are still in Central Time. My name is Zane Panel, and I graduated from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. When I first started my career, I started with the Tennessee Department of Transportation. And so what they have is a graduate transportation associates program where it's like a 1-year probationary period. You get a lot of experience throughout the state and, you know, throughout the different topic or different sections within the department. Then my first promotion came as a transportation project specialist senior. And like Benjetta was saying, like you have to wait till the vacancy comes open, then you apply. And in that senior position, I supervised 2 men that were CAD techs, and there was a bit of a 20 to 30 year age difference. So that was a good experience for me personally. And understanding kind of the generations in the workforce. Since then, I was the regional traffic engineer for the Middle Tennessee region. As regional traffic engineer, I had a staff of about 25, and we had 4 engineers and a couple ASAs, and the rest were all maintenance employees. And now my current role is I'm a city engineer with the city of Brentwood, which is just south of Nashville, Tennessee.
Awesome. Thank you, Zane. And Jeff, if we can pull up our first question, we have a question for you as the audience, which is how many years of experience do you have in the industry? I think we'll get that pulled up. Looks like we do have kind of a mix coming in here. Jeff, this is new to me. Do you share it, or is it popped up still on everyone's screen? So it looks like we have a handful of people certainly that are in that supervisory role, a little more senior in their careers, but the majority fall in the 3 to 4 year category, with 8 individuals, and then most in the 5 to 7 or below. That'll just help guide our conversation a little bit so we understand exactly who we're speaking to. Most of my questions here, I will hand to all of you, and I'll pick around. We can jump around, just have a good time kind of talking about this. And let's start talking about kind of our individual experiences. Benjetta, tell me about your promotional expectations and what was shared with you early in your career.
So what I would say is working for a state agency, a pretty large state agency here in North Carolina, the Department of Transportation has, or I guess at that time, probably 15 to 20,000 employees. So it was a pretty big agency, lots of different departments. And so what was kind of expressed to me at that time was, the sky was kind of the limit. Similar to what Zane experienced, there were people who went on what we call the training program, got a lot of exposure with different departments, whether that was roadway design, environmental design, planning, or traffic. And so really, you were encouraged to kind of learn a lot in technical areas, get as much experience, broaden your experience as much as you could in order to get a promotion. Because, fortunately or unfortunately, promotions kind of came along as people kind of got other promotions or aged out or left their department for a new experience. And so if you had a broad variety of experience, if you were seeking a promotion, you could potentially find it in a different department than the one or the unit that you were particularly working for. So that was something that I kind of took to heart. I spent the majority of my time in what we considered the traffic engineering department or safety and mobility. So all of my experience was there, and I lucked out that I was able to learn a lot in those areas, but stay within that same department and kind of move up.
Fantastic. Adrian or Zane, do you want to jump in on expectations shared with you early?
I can go next. So early on, so on the private side, they do try to be, I think, fairly transparent with Kimley Horn. I actually worked for another company too that maybe wasn't as transparent. But basically early on, they share a career ladder that has like general characteristics, duties and responsibilities, experience abilities, and attainments. So there's very specific skill sets for each category on the career ladder. So you see that, but in general, it just seems like it might not be consistent office to office. Sometimes there might be some gray area, right? It's not just like you check a box. So there's that piece where, you know, you have to talk to your supervisor about, but fairly transparent because we also have a lot of reporting. Beth knows because she also worked for Kimley Horn. We have like bi-weekly, monthly reports that come out with all of your goals. So you can see whether you're meeting expectations with billable hours or with profitability. So the expectations are fairly clear with Kimley Horn specifically.
Yeah, so a little bit of experience from TDOT, like Benjetta was talking about. You kind of have to wait till people age out. You know, it's a big organization, and so that first year, really being able to like go across the board and really experience like what they do in planning, what they do in traffic, what they do in design was very beneficial because I started out at TDOT in the regional traffic office and then switched to planning and safety. And it was just a lateral transfer over with planning and safety. I was promoted within there, and then did another lateral transfer back over to the region. So really being able to like look across the spectrum and not just focus on one thing individual. Like if you really wanted to do traffic, you just kind of have to broaden your spectrum of what you're wanting to do.
So it does sound like, you know, whether you're private sector or public sector, you know, you talk about TDOT being a huge organization, you talk about, you know, there's maybe a clear career ladder, but also specifically in a larger organization, you need to stand out in some way. Zane, what did you do to stand out to make those transfers and those early promotions happen for yourself?
Yeah, so when I first graduated college, ArcGIS was a big thing, and which it's very familiar to most people now, but I really became very familiar on how to use it and became what I call an asset, you know, for TDOT to come to and say when they needed maps, when they need visualization. And like now there's a lot of 3D, you know, everything's going to open roads design, open roads design, ORD. So I think there's a good place to stand out in the 3D modeling world, and there's Vism. You know, you could become a power user in Vism if you're interested in traffic. So
yeah, Adrian, you want to jump in?
Sure. I think one thing that stood out is I was always trying to learn, you know, new skill sets. I guess more to Zane's point, trying to say yes to every project someone maybe to offer. But obviously there's a fine balance. You don't want to take on too much where then you start missing deadlines. But, you know, saying yes, learning all types of skill sets, all different types of projects. And I used to, not saying you have to do this, but I used to sometimes spend weekends like trying to research or learn new skills or reading a manual about a program, just trying to get ahead, because sometimes it's hard to kind of hit the ground running if you're not familiar with certain programs or standards or anything of that sort. I really did try my hardest to try to research at night or even on weekends to try to stand out more. And obviously just doing a great job on projects and exceeding expectations, I think was a really important aspect of how I got promoted.
Mm-hmm. I know that this will tie back a little bit. As I look at each of us, I think each of us worked through as engineers during the recession in 2008 through 2010. And I think that really taught us probably to do exactly what you just said there. Say yes to everything you possibly can without overburdening yourself. And, you know, basically find something that makes you stand out as an individual.
Yeah, be flexible. I think flexibility is really important, and you're able to pivot quickly to maybe a new task is great, especially with the recession, depending on what was happening. it's easy to know, oh, I've done that before, and it's, you know, you can continue working. So I think that's really important. Hopefully no other recession, whatever is going to happen in the future. But
absolutely. Benjetta, do you want to talk about anything that made you stand out, or also specific actions maybe that you had to take to get those first promotions?
So I would echo what Adrian said about trying to be flexible and learn as much as you can. Similar to what Zane said as well, I had some skills that maybe some of the other engineers in my department didn't have, because I had some design skills coming in. So, you know, depending on what it is that you're interested in, try to make sure that if you're going to be a planner, that you're not just doing planning, that you know a little bit of something about design. If you're doing design, maybe something about public involvement. I try to definitely go after some projects that I found interesting. And I made sure that, because there were a lot of older, more experienced engineers in my department, that I picked their brain about why they were going after certain alternatives. You know, when you're younger, you don't have as much engineering judgment, and there's no technical way to gain it other than working on lots of projects. So trying to really dig in and find out like why we did things the way that we did them, and kind of mined as much information from the older engineers in the department as I possibly could.
Absolutely. I think we all did something right young in our careers. I'll throw this one out to all of y'all, and anyone can jump in. Do you feel like you were promoted on pace with your expectations? And if not, why? Or if so, you know, why and how? What did you do?
I'll start. Not always is my response. It really depends. I think early on in my career, I wasn't as focused, I think, on promotions. I was more focused on learning, and I think, you know, Benjetta mentioned is just learning whatever I can, say yes to everything. I wasn't as focused to try to understand the promotion cycle, which I think hurt me a little bit, because I wasn't having the right conversations. I wasn't promoting myself enough, and I think that's really important. You have to be your biggest cheerleader. Make sure you tell everyone what you're doing, even though you might find it sometimes maybe annoying, but you have to be your biggest cheerleader. And I think I learned early on maybe why I wasn't promoted. Looking back now, it's just because I wasn't asking the right questions. I wasn't having the right conversations. And I think later on, I became very knowledgeable about what you need to do. But it took me some time to really learn the ropes and fully understand.
Yeah, I would second that. I would say, for me, I felt like early on, you know, you get that kind of first promotion under your belt and you're excited. And then I kind of got to a place, like Adrian said, where you're kind of doing that job and trying to do the best you can at it. And then you can see that there are other people in the organization that maybe are moving, and you're thinking like, hey, I'm doing the same types of projects as this person. Like, why have they gotten 3 promotions and I've gotten 1? And sometimes it's not a reflection of you doing something poorly. It's just that person's in the room having those conversations that you're not having. And so, especially I would say on the public sector, sometimes there's a clear promotional path, but there may be somebody that's in a particular position that you're seeking. You can't move that person out. I mean, they may stay there for another 20 years, unfortunately. And so you got to kind of be creative about how you can still get to the place where you can get that supervisory or management experience. And it may mean that you have to take a lateral to a different department, or just seek out a different kind of pathway where it's not kind of a straight line, but it's a little curvy path, but it still gets you to that same point that you want to be at.
Yeah, and like Benjetta said, like not being scared to take that lateral transfer, because I did 2 lateral transfers, as mentioned earlier, and it turned out to be very positive for me. But starting out early on, you know, it's a waiting game with TDOT, and being able to like see an org chart in front of you, because all department transportations are about org charts, and being able to go to your director and kind of talk to him about your career and what you're looking for, and having them be open and honest. And again, like Adrian was talking about, where you have to be your biggest cheerleader, because no one else is going to advocate for you but yourself. So
I heard something. I'm going to throw y'all a little bit of a curveball. How do you do everything y'all just described without getting caught up in competitiveness?
Mhm.
I heard a little bit of that tucked in there.
I think that might be different on the private side because we're not competing for like specific roles, like maybe Zane and Vegeta was talking about. Maybe, you know, 5 people can get promoted at the same time, but you guys are competing with positions. So I think the competitiveness is still there. I think everyone loves competition, right? So it's hard not to get caught up in that, but I really would try to focus on yourself. I always tell a lot of folks I supervise, don't keep on comparing yourself, spending all that energy and time comparing yourself when you just need to focus on yourself. Focus on what you're doing and not what someone else is doing. I know it's hard, it's better, it's easier said than done. But it's just something that you have to spend focus your energy in the right place. I'm sure Zane or Vegeta, if you'd like to add anything on the public side.
I would say I think that is definitely true on the private side. On the public side, you know, there may be one position, there could be 5 or 6 people that want that job. They're all qualified to have it. And so, you know, like you said, you have to do your best at positioning yourself. And like I said before, it's not so much that person may be more qualified or better qualified for that job. There's one position, and so they're kind of picking who they think is going to be the best to fill that role. And I think in situations like that, if you don't get that promotion that you're looking for, it's not always a reflection of something that you're lacking or that you haven't done. It could just be you've got a 1 in 5 chance of getting it. You know, if you get that opportunity, talk to that hiring manager and say, hey, is there something I could have done better? You know, is there another opportunity? And if you've been doing a good job, they'll say, hey, you know, we couldn't give you this position here, but maybe there's, you know, a position in this other department. I can make a recommendation for you. You can still get this great experience and opportunity. And so it becomes a win-win in that kind of situation.
yeah, and when I was at TDOT, I think it's being able to know, like, if you don't get accepted for the position, you know, you don't worry about the other people. When I was in the planning and safety division, I think within 4 years they changed the org chart up like 4 or 5 times. So there's opportunities out there, and it's just you got to keep knocking on the door, but you know, don't create the competition because you're still going to continue working with.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
I think we all know too, this is it's a small industry.
Mm-hmm.
People that you bump into at one point, you will bump into again. Last question kind of under this section before I think we pivot, and this is maybe a little bit of a pivot. What's a piece of advice, if you have one, that you were provided previously early in your career by leadership about direction for promotions or growing your career? And what did somebody else tell you? And I know, Zane, you have probably a couple.
Yeah, so when you start supervising and you start becoming a quote manager, I was told very early on that people are going to look at you different. People are going to treat you differently, and nothing about you has changed, and nothing about your character has changed. But because you're now overseeing them and you're telling them what to do and what needs to be done, people look at you differently, and you have to be able to accept that, and you have to, you know, stay positive and be confident when you're going in to deliver projects.
Jetta or Adrian, do you have any?
Just to clarify, you're asking for what advice we
Others
got.
have told you, that you received.
There's so much. I'm going to try to not be too long, but I asked a lot of questions after, you know, maybe I was in Vegeta's position where you see other people get promoted and maybe you're not being promoted. And I think you need to learn who the decision makers are. It's really important to understand the cycles. It's more on the private side. Make sure you know the timing, because you can ask someone for lunch a few weeks before you know a discussion is going to happen, because some people don't always remember what you were doing you talked to them 2 months ago. So it's really good to understand the decision makers, start those conversations early, let them know everything you've been doing. Like I think everyone's saying, be your biggest cheerleader. It's super important. Also, too, I always tell people to have that 2-minute elevator speech ready. Sure, everyone's heard about this, but you run into somebody, you can say, you know, I'm working on this awesome project. I did ABC. You know, it's really exciting. You know, if someone asks how you're doing, it might be a little long, but at the same time, at least you could share a couple of sentences about what you're doing, what you've been up to. I think it's really important. That elevator speech, I think, has really helped me when I run into people in the hallways. It's, I think, been really important just to make people aware of what you're doing is key. I can share more later throughout if we have more time.
We'll have more opportunity.
Okay.
Benjetta, do you have anything somebody told you?
I would say, I mean, gosh, you guys have said kind of almost everything I would think of. You know, a lot of times you just got to be really, it sounds simple, but being super nice to people, just being kind as a human being goes a long way, because I think sometimes engineers can be kind of very like, I'm going to do my job, tunnel vision, like, you know, and not be as emotionally present at work. But even just interacting with your coworkers just on a fun level goes a long way, because people want to work with people that they like. So be likable.
Awesome. Thank you. With that, we're going to jump to our next survey question, which is, do you work in the private sector or the public sector? A little simple, straightforward one, just to direct our next section here. And somebody, Adrian, tell me, can you
see it? Yes.
I was very nervous last time.
Yep.
All right, so right now we're at 15 for private sector and 3 for public sector. So definitely leaning heavily towards private sector. We will still take a minute here and talk about kind of the differences, and start with you, Benjetta, because you're the only one of us that have worked on both sides. So I think that you will have the perspective, certainly. So I guess the question is what do you see as the biggest differences for promotional opportunities between the private side and the public side?
So I would say it's probably just the number and spacing between the promotions. In the public sector, there's a lot of a hierarchy that you probably don't get in the private sector. Most private organizations are a little more flat in that way, where, you know, you have a department manager, but, you know, people can move up kind of independent of each other. And if someone's doing a great job, they can be promoted to project manager and gain some responsibilities and supervisory tasks that way. Where at the public sector, it's a lot more regimented, where, you know, everybody is on that org chart in that particular place. So I think that's really the main difference. You've got a lot more flexibility on the private side that you just don't have in the public sector, just because of just the way that it's structured.
Zane, do you have anything to add on that? I know you haven't been in the private sector, but you're muted, Zane.
No, the only thing I really have to add is I've worked on 2 sides of the public sector. So I've worked for the state, for Tennessee Department of Transportation, now at the city of Brentwood, and so each of them are different. City of Brentwood, you don't have as many promotional opportunities just because it's a smaller organization, but you're also like, what are you wanting? Like, because with the department, you're solely focused on one thing. Like, you're either solely focused on design or traffic or safety, but with the city, it's, you know, you have subdivision going in, you're looking at roads, you're looking at drainage. You know, someone has a lighting question, and you've got to find the answer. You got to find what the codes say. So that's really the 2 biggest differences. I think is with the state, you're solely focused on one, but with the city, you got to have a broad spectrum of civil engineering.
Switching from state to city, has your perspective changed? Like have your personal goals changed, I guess is a good way to say it.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, switching from the state to the city, it's been a very large shift because you're not managing as many people, but you're still having to make sure contractors and consultants are upholding the code, the City of Brentwood code. So overall, it's been a shift of going and out and working every day to actually being able to stand behind the code and support it. Because if you don't, then somebody will definitely report it. So.
Mm-hmm. All right, one last question on this section. We're going to kind of quickly move ahead to the next one. For Benjetta and Zane, is there anything specific public sector employees should focus on related to promotional opportunities that you haven't already said? Because you've said quite a bit.
So I would say one thing that I felt like the public sector did a really good job of was continuing education. I think the training, at least the training that I got with the Department of Transportation, it was always ongoing. They were always trying to be innovative about what types of projects they were pushing and promoting. And there were a lot of opportunities just to increase your technical knowledge. So that was something that they did, and they paid for it, they promoted it. It was almost like part of your job that you had to be kind of up on all of the standards, all of, like Zane was saying, all of the codes, those things that were constantly changing. And so I would say, I tried to take advantage of every single one of those. And anytime there was leadership training or supervisory training, that sort of thing, public speaking, I took advantage of those kind of in-house training courses that the department allowed us to take advantage of, because they could help me, even if they weren't, I couldn't use them in that specific role that I had at the time. I knew that later on they'd be beneficial.
That's a really good one.
Yeah, and for me, I would say building relationships, because you never know like who your next boss is going to be. My current boss used to be the director of construction. Now she is the director of Brentwood, or director of engineering for the city of Brentwood. And what Benjetta said earlier about just being kind to people, it goes a long way. And so with that, you never know. You never know who your next boss is going to be. So building the relationships, being kind to people, it's a lot about your reputation. Like Beth was saying, it's a small, tight-knit group, especially in the Middle Tennessee region.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to ask another survey question, our last one, asking you to be a little open with us here, audience. So the question is, thus far in your career, have your promotion opportunities met your expectations? These are anonymous, by the way. We do have a little bit of a mix. We have 4 people that have said no, and 1 person that said not sure, and 9 people that have said yes. So a good mix, definitely a little of all. We did end up getting 1 more at the end that said no. I think that's important, and we'll certainly, when we're done, we can answer specific questions if anyone has one. But we're going to talk about some of the what we've heard and advice we've given, and jump into that now. So open to the group, whoever wants to jump in. What questions or comments have you received or are you receiving from those you either supervise or mentor? And they can be in the past too.
I will start. So like I mentioned, I managed a large office, so I got a lot of questions and comments. So as soon as promotions would come out, I would have people come and ask, what happened? I thought I would get promoted. what am I doing wrong? What's going on? So you get a lot of questions. And so a lot of advice you give, it depends on the person's situation specifically. But I already mentioned a lot of the advice I would give, but a lot of comments are, people get really down and it's hard sometimes to get out of that. Some people, you could see a couple of weeks it might take them to get over it. And it's just a recommendation to those folks is you have to stay positive, because if you get too down or about a promotion, it tends to just kind of spiral and impact your work. So I think it's really important to try to stay positive as best as possible. But I get a lot of questions about, what do I need to do next time specifically? People really want to know specifics. They don't want to just know something general. You need to do A, B, C. It's like they want to know a SMART goal, something specific and measurable that they can do. So I think that it's sometimes hard because promotion cycles, even on the private side, like I said, you think you're meeting all the expectations, but there's a lot of gray areas. I think sometimes it just really depends too about your personal brand. I don't know if we didn't really touch on that yet, but I think it's really important to establish personal branding is something that I never even thought of, I think early on in my career, until I went through kind of a 360 review. And I thought it was really interesting to see what people thought of me, something I didn't really think of myself. So, your personal brand being super important. And sometimes you can even ask people honest opinion, like, what do you think about this? Or what do you think about this that I'm doing? Even putting out surveys. I know there's these 360 reviews online that you could have your colleagues take. I don't know on the private or on the public side, you guys have those, but on the private side, we use those a lot. It's a great tool to kind of really get an understanding of what people think of you. And then how do you adjust then? Like whatever comments you get, maybe is there something that you can improve on? How can you improve your personal brand? I think is really key. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, all of us have a personal brand, whether or not we realize it or not, which probably, goes back to the nice thing a couple of us have mentioned.
Yeah, and building off that personal brand. So the first guy I ever supervised, he was a CAD tech for about 20 years. And so I was sitting down and we were doing crash diagrams, and something I thought was super simple and easy to do. And I was sitting there working through the crash diagrams with him. And so he just turned to me and looked at me and he said, Zane, he said, in 20 years, you're the only supervisor I've ever had to sit down and work with me. And so from that kind of set the tone of like how my supervising and my managing style. And so when I went over to the region, and then I had supervised, managed an office of 25 there with 20 maintenance guys. They didn't know me. They had no idea who I was. Young engineer coming in there telling them what to do. And so one of the admin ladies there, she said, you really got to get in the trenches with these guys and work. And so, if you have the opportunity to supervise maintenance or construction employees, like you've got to get out there with them and you've got to be able to work with them. And with that, I still had my job, my engineering roles to do, but I would get out there with them when they'd close lanes down at night, and we'd work on signs at night. And when the first time they ever put me in a bucket truck 30 feet over the interstate, they were like, you know what you're doing? And I was like, yeah, I do. So being able to know tools, being able to know how to use impact wrenches and drills, like those kind of guys really, and girls, they really appreciate that you can design it and you can also build it. So those are fun times.
Yeah, I would agree with the things that have been said. I actually had a 360 review as part of a leadership class while I was at the state, and it was very enlightening. And then some things that I learned, that maybe there were people who viewed me in a completely different way than I viewed myself. There were things that I thought maybe were a weakness, and other people didn't see it that way. So sometimes we can be a little overly judgmental of ourselves and critical. I would also say that through the mentoring I've done, either through organizations or with my own employees, I get a lot of questions about even balancing kind of your work life and your home life. It's probably just because I'm a woman, and so there are fewer women in our industry, and so I get a lot of questions about that. So I just try to give people my personal experience with everything. I think I've had a pretty good career, and I think a lot of it sometimes is my mentality has just been that I have been like one of the guys. I mean, at this point, after you've been working and going to school and everything, I mean, it shouldn't still be at the forefront of your mind that you're like the only girl. Like, you should have gotten kind of out of that when you were in the civil engineering classes. At least that was my experience at NC State was, you know, there's only a few of us there. And so if I'm going to be there, I just wanted to kind of shine and be myself. So I would say as far as branding and that sort of thing, I just try to encourage people to really be themselves, to shine and be great at what it is that they do. If there's something you do well, you shouldn't kind of shrink in that area. You should be able to say, hey, I'm great at this. I need help at these other things, and find those people you can partner with that kind of make you stronger as a team. So I try to encourage people to be good team players all the time, because if you're the smartest person in the room, there's gonna be a problem.
Very true. Very true. This is maybe a little bit of a pivot, but I think it will be a good discussion. Let's talk a minute about how timeline varies between individuals. And I'd love to know your thoughts on you know, how that timeline varies, and then what impacts those variations for individuals. Benjetta, do you want to start us off on that one?
So I would say for the people who are younger on the, which you're probably all younger than me on the call, the 20 years goes by really fast. And so now I'm like, I'm that person in the office that's like, yeah, I've been doing this for 20 years. And, you know, we have new employees. They're born in like the 90s. I'm like, the 90s? Are you serious? You know, so you have a timeline. I think it's great for you to set goals. I usually try to set, you know, a yearly goal, a 3-year goal, a 5-year goal. But that time right now, it seems like an infinity. It comes by really, really quickly. So if you don't hit every milestone you think is within a certain amount of time, you've got another year. You know, just keep it on the list is always my thing. And I think as far as things that kind of maybe throw it off there, you know, life is life. Nobody knew that we were going to spend the past 18 months like locked in our house. I definitely didn't think I was going to juggle school and work and homeschooling my kids, but I survived it. And so I think it goes back to that flexibility. You put those things on your wish list and you work towards them, but if they move out a little bit, it doesn't mean they're off the list. You can still go chasing after them.
I guess I'll discuss timeline and individuals. I know in the private side, I was able to see a lot of variations depending on the person. I managed an office of, let's say, like 75 people. I got to see really a lot of insight of like, why is this person getting promoted? Maybe this person isn't. I think being self-aware is super important. I think a lot of people who were not getting promoted, honestly, just were not self-aware of what they were doing and how that would impact others. I almost recommend people that if you don't think you're self-aware, or if you think you could work on it, you read a book about it. Try to improve your self-awareness, because it's really interesting to or even the 360 review is for someone that maybe is not self-aware, is really eye-opening. If you get a lot of feedback that you weren't expecting, I think that's really important. I also think attitude is everything. People that tend to be very negative or always down, you ask them to do something and they're just making a really big deal about something. You're like, come on, like this isn't that hard. I think some people that generally are more negative tend to not get promoted as fast, unfortunately. So really be careful about your attitude. I know sometimes we all have our bad days, don't get me wrong. But just remember, you know, being positive is important. I think Magenta said, no one wants to work with somebody they don't really like. So you want to be likable. And having a bad attitude, many people don't want to work with you, which will reflect in your promotion cycle, which I think is key.
I think one thing to say too to that, Adrian, is everybody, you know, there's lots of different personalities in engineering, and I don't think that what you're talking about is the shy person or the introverted person or something like that. Everybody can be nice. You can be nice, whether you're, introverted or extroverted. Everyone can do some of these things. Everyone can be more self-aware than they are, however self-aware they are. So, I think that the diverse personalities in engineering, just a few little things don't necessarily hold you back. And Zane, I don't know if you were going to jump in, but sorry.
Yeah, no, just the self-awareness and the attitude speak volumes, especially in the public sector. And Benjetta was talking about setting goals of like 1 year and 3 years and 5 years, and being able to be flexible in those goals is a big thing. And because life happens, and I have a 1-year-old, and I never thought I'd work for the city of Brentwood, but the opportunity came open, and I'm thankful for it, because personally, I'm not driving across the state anymore. I'm just right here next to home. So yeah, being able to be flexible and being able self-aware and having a positive attitude really reflects a lot.
Absolutely. I think we've already given a lot of advice. What about, I'd like to discuss maybe the kind of in-between steps of promotions. And we touched on this a little bit, I think, when we were talking about our own careers. Talk about how an employee can gain more latitude, additional responsibilities or flexibility that might not have a title change attached to it, and kind of, what that could look like, expectations for that, and then just how you might explain that or sell that to an employee. There's a lot. Sorry, I put a lot in there.
So I would say, especially for my younger engineers that I'm managing, I try to push them a little bit. If I know that somebody's really good technically at something, but I don't see them necessarily being as great with having supervisory skills or that sort of thing, I will ask them, hey, do you want to take on the responsibility of managing the new intern that we have for the summer? So there, we have some pretty young engineers here who only have a year or two out of school. They probably have more in common with the intern than I do, 20 years in. It's a great opportunity for them to be able to manage someone, make sure that they can teach them a skill. Because I think, you're best if you learn something and you can teach it to someone else, at being able to explain it, to a lay person. That goes a long way. So I try to say, hey, I want you to build your technical skills, but I want you to build kind of that management side too. And so there's some small ways that you can do that. You can take on those kind of tasks. If they're clients, asking if you can go along to some of those client meetings, just so you can observe the interaction that people have, that project manager is going to have with that client, and talking them up or interacting in those meetings is really valuable when it's your opportunity to be able to do it later.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think to add on what Benjetta said, supervising staff is definitely a really great in-between step, because it gives you a lot more latitude. You're in the conversations. Maybe, we always usually reach out to people's supervisors for advice, whether they should get promoted. So you're in the conversation, which is great. To really understand how it even works, the process, I think is really important. Another thing too that I'm seeing more and more now is like trying to think outside the box, come up with new ideas of how to automate things. We have so many. Python was nothing. It wasn't anything when I was in college. We did not use Python, but there's a lot of really bright engineers out there coming up with a lot of creative ideas. It's a great in-between step, because it really makes you shine, and I think, and you automate a process that may have taken 5 hours. You can write a script in Python and make it 15 minutes. Everyone's like, wow, look at what Brian did. This is amazing. This is saving me so much time. And those folks have really, I think, been promoted faster, because they, they're making everyone's lives easier, which is great. So it's a really good in-between step that I've seen recently, which is something that you wouldn't have seen a lot in like 10 years ago, but now it just seems like there's more and more creative ideas coming in play with technology.
Anything from you, Zane, or else I'll ask my last question.
I don't have anything.
Okay, so my last question actually going to be the most vague. is there any advice you would like to give to supervisors or young professionals that we haven't, that, I tried to kind of send you in a couple directions, but is there anything we've missed?
I think the biggest thing that was said was being kind and respecting others. So no matter what their title is, if they're your boss, if they're your director, if they're out in the field working, just being kind and respecting others. The biggest one.
I'll add on, try to be pretty strategic, I think. Come up with like a 5-year plan. Sorry, I'm fighting a cold, so I'm losing my voice a little bit. But I would say work with your supervisor, come up with kind of some milestones, have something in writing. I think it's important just to write it down. Like, where do you want to be in 5 years? What are you doing? Sometimes it seems like, really, do I need to do this? But yeah, it's important to just identify what you want to do and make sure that your supervisors, the folks you work with, want to know where you want to go, and is important just to have the conversation. So sometimes we call them like not business plans, we call them like kind of a career plan, really, is what I'm trying to say. Is really important just to write it down, have it next to your desk, remind yourself. You sometimes revisit it monthly. Sometimes like, what can I do different? What am I doing? Maybe something I'm not doing as well. It's just great a great reminder.
Yeah, I would say it's also really good if you have that plan. You're probably going to have a yearly review or a quarterly review or something like that. So it's a good time to mention that to the person that's managing you, to say, hey, this is what my ultimate goal is. And then that person can come along and partner with you to try to push you towards that goal. I think it helps as a manager and a supervisor, if someone is coming to me with some goals, it gives me an opportunity to say, okay, well, let's sign you up for this type of training. We want you to go to these kind of conferences. Maybe you should join this organization for, minorities, or for, women transportation seminar, that sort of thing. So you can link up with other people and expand your network. Because it may be that opportunity, we can work on some internal job responsibilities, but it may be that, if you partner up with some other people, they can kind of give you a little gust of wind to kind of get you in that direction too.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. So we have 5 or 6 minutes left. If you have any questions, you can drop them into the chat. I think that's because we don't have any questions that have come in throughout. I think the chat is probably the best place to put those. The chat button should be at the bottom of your screen. I think 18 months into this pandemic, I think hopefully everybody knows how to work Zoom and type in a question if you have one. We'll give it just a minute. While we wait, thanks y'all. I really, since we didn't, practice what we were going to say or anything, we just are sharing stories. I'm very glad it seems like we all did land at the same point of being kind and nice and having a plan for yourself and speaking up for yourself. And I think those are things that I agree with completely. We have one question. Any suggestions for people in very small agencies with no place to advance? Zane, or Adrian, you can kick in. But.
Yeah, I would say suggestions for people in very small agencies. So I work in a very small agency now, and you're constantly making contacts with other agencies. And I'm not saying that to jump ship, but it's having those contacts and having those relationships with other agencies in the area has been the most beneficial, I think.
Adrian, were you going to say something too?
No, because I think a firm is different than agencies. So I think Zane had the best advice.
It is. If I think that goes back to the gaining latitude or growing your network, gaining respect from peers outside your agency. We can all grow in our career, even if our title isn't going to change, because wherever we're working is a small company or small agency. Another question, does anyone have experience or tips for being promoted over a coworker who is also a friend? I'm guessing we've probably all had that happen to us at some point.
I would say, so when I first got to the department, there were a group of us that came in kind of all together, and we were promoted at different levels throughout our career. And so I think that kindness conversation comes into play there. You being promoted to manager or supervisor doesn't mean that you're like lording over people. And I think, as Adrian alluded, sometimes when people don't get that promotion, it takes them a little while to kind of get over the disappointment of not getting it. But I think if you're still being genuinely who you are and just kind and respectful, that person comes along. You don't have to try to completely like mend their feelings, because it's kind of a personal thing that they've got to work out. But if they see that you're still being respectful and doing a good job, they get over it pretty quickly. And it doesn't mean that that person ultimately is never going to get promoted. So, you know, the way things work out, we've all been promoted, we're all doing great, and we were able to maintain a friendship. So that would be my advice.
Anyone else on that one?
I think that Jenna covered it all. Thank you.
I think there's something to be said too for, you know, if that did happen to you, turning around and reaching out a hand, and, you know, again, probably letting it settle, giving that person the couple weeks they need. But if you have advice, share it. Like, we're all in this together. Everybody's careers are growing and moving forward, sometimes at different paces. But exactly like Benjetta said, we're all getting there eventually.
Yeah, and I think encouragement is important. Just encourage them, you know, don't give up, right? You'll get it sometime. It's just obviously, you know, maybe not this time, but I think some encouraging words is always important.
I think we have time for one more question, if there is one. I think Cindy has jumped already, but this was, I believe, Cindy's brainchild, this series, Cindy Pianchi, who just retired. So we'll miss you, Cindy, and congratulations if you're still on. If there is one more question, we can wait and hang on. Otherwise, we'll wrap up here in just 1 minute. Oh, there's one in the Q&A if y'all, anonymous attendee. Okay. What if your coworker keeps asking your manager to train him for the things that you are working on, and training that person will cause you to have delays? It's an interesting question.
I think I know what he or she is getting at. Yeah, I think that could be frustrating sometimes because it's delaying you. You want to get work done and you're training somebody else. I know a lot of firms grow pretty fast and you have new people always asking you a million questions. I think you have to talk to your supervisor to let them know maybe the delays it's causing, just so that they can anticipate maybe you need more help, more support. But remember, whoever you're training, you could delegate to. So remember that you're training your replacement, right? You always want to be training your replacement because you want to move on, right? So try to be positive and thinking, okay, well, once I teach them how to do ABC, I don't have to do that anymore. I'll have this person do that, and I can move on to some other things that I want to do or focus on more. It took me a long time to learn delegation. Sometimes you don't want to let go of things, but it's super important to get promoted, I think, to move on to bigger, better things.
Absolutely. Well, we're at 12:30 Central, y'all. So thank you. I think this was a great discussion. I really appreciate each of you taking a little bit of time last week and this week to help me with this. And I hope people found it as a valuable session.